Thank you for being here this morning. Good to see everybody. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty.
I move that we forego the song.
Yes, we are.
Good.
Unless you're going to sing solo, Todd.
Well, only if you raise my pay.
All right. Next week it's double and you will sing.
I can do that.
All right. We had a nice board meeting yesterday morning. As of right now, the board has decided that we'll meet virtually at least through the end of July. So plan on that. We'll see where we're at that point. We also agreed to, it was $1,500, right? We agreed to give to Aaron's project.
Yes.
So we're planning on doing that right away. Any other action items that we went through? I think that was it. I do want to let everybody know that we were planning on supporting Erin and her literacy project with that donation. So
that's great.
All right. I think Ruth's going to get with you, Todd, and figure out how to get that to Erin.
Okay.
All right. I can only see the 9 people here, so who's all?
If you tell you how you can change that, go down to where it says video.
Go down where it says video.
If you go all the way down to the bottom, you should have a row where it says a variety of things, including mute and stop video.
Okay, mine's at the top. I'm on an iPad.
Okay, go to video settings.
That's all backwards.
Yeah, no wonder. Go to video settings. And then in the video settings, down to where it says meetings, it says display up to 49 participants per screen in gallery view. Then you can get everybody in on one.
Probably about $89.
It's small, but you can get them there.
Okay, I'm not finding that.
I can show you later if need be.
Show me now, dang it. Oh, hands back. All right. Well, good to see everybody. So we got 13 online today. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yep, including Ann, there's 13, yes.
All right. Anybody have any announcements they'd like to make? Bob, do you want to give an update of what's going on with your son?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Matt received his bone marrow transplant on about 5:30 Friday night. We actually were watching it on Microsoft Team, and we said something to the doctor, this is unusual. He said, oh, not really. And normally you can have visitors there. He said, I've had as many as 20 people in the room watching it in the past. So this is better than having everybody here.
Wow.
What's happened since that time is he's now had 2 more rounds of chemo yesterday and the day before. He's beginning to, he's had some nausea and weakness, and his tough times will be between the 5th of June and the 12th of June. And what they describe is that the donor's bone marrow is racing around his body trying to find some place to land and then begin to work. He did get up and walk some in the hall yesterday, which was encouraging. So we talk about once a day, and he's doing okay. And just as expected, he'll begin taking some anti-rejection medicines today. I don't know what that is, probably cyclosporin or something like that. And I don't know how long he'll have to take that, but we'll see. So all in all, it's going like it should. Hopefully, he's scheduling to be out of there like the 23rd of June. that's the status. We're going as expected. That's all we can say at this point in time.
Very good.
Good.
All right. So Mike, good news for Rittner School District last night. You want to give us a quick update? You're muted. Mike, you're muted.
Unfortunately, I can't unmute, but I'll throw a screen up there.
How's that? My
Much
space bar isn't responding like it should be. So I was saying I would like to pass to Jerry only because I don't want to take his limelight. Jerry was the leader of this effort. Jerry put together, organized, rallied, and it was really a landslide. If you look at the results across multiple school districts, Rittner had a very, very supportive show yesterday. But I'll turn this over to Jerry if he'd like to give more details.
There we go. It wasn't my show. I was just fortunate to have a lot of good people that were working with me, and basically they called me and said, "Hey, we need this." And I said, "Oh yeah, I didn't think about that." And it was a good group of people, and yeah, I'm very thankful. The bond issue passed with about an 80% approval, which is last night we had our virtual watch party, and they said that's one of the highest that we've had in a long time. So it's, I am absolutely wonderfully pleased with the support. And like I said earlier, that's well over $100 million in the past 30 years that our voters, taxpayers have approved. So they still must think something is going on right. I know there's a few naysayers out there, but that's the way it goes. But very proud to be associated with Rittner, as you all know.
Thanks, Jerry, for your efforts, and Mike for your continued. And Tavanda would like to say something. So Tavanda, you're on.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I wanted to join today just to make sure that everybody was aware that this was going to be it for me with Rotary. I know some people are aware, but I wanted to make sure that you guys heard it from me. My life has taken a bunch of different turns. I'm back in grad school so that I can be an administrator, which has actually been going really well. I was kind of worried about it because I haven't been in school so long, but my first 2 classes are off to a good start. I'm a little tired, but and I'm not teaching leadership anymore. I don't have the student leadership class, but the good news is that it's been recommended for 2 of my former student leaders to step in and run that program, and I will be supporting them. So I'm really, really excited about that. But I wanted to formally say goodbye, or maybe even see you later, right? Because we never know how life will change again. So thank you guys for always having my back, and I just wanted to make sure I came in and give that formal announcement.
We'll
Well,
miss
thank
you.
you,
Good
Tavanda.
luck to you, Tavanda.
We are
Been,
going to miss you, and I've kind of heard rumors about who've been recommended, and you did a nice job when they were our students, training them for that. And sad that you're going to leave, but I think you're going to make a great administrator. I really do.
Thanks.
So
Absolutely.
you know that because I tried to get you to take my job, but your heart was in a different place. So,
Thank
and
you,
by
Jerry.
the way, you've done a fantastic job getting those kids over the edge that are just kind of on the bubble. So you're a great inspiration.
Thank you. The work continues today with summer school.
Hey, Tavanda, I want to say thanks so much for all your help with Rotary. Every time I'd send you an email, you would respond like instantaneously, and You always got the student Rotarians for us, and we're going to miss that. So we'll have to find someone to step into your shoes for that. But we'll sure miss you, but we wish you the best of luck, and we do hope to see you again sometime.
Thanks, Ann.
Yeah, Tavanda, I also wanted to say thanks. You've been a great member of our club, and hope someday that you come back as a member.
Absolutely.
Good luck to you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I
Good
appreciate
luck,
it.
Vonda.
Very much so. Don't take as long to come back as Jerry did. I mean, there is, so make it a little quicker.
Yeah, well.
Sorry, but not sorry, Jerry. You know, I'm just putting it out there.
She's younger and smarter than me, so,
All righty.
Well,
Anybody else
I
have
guess,
any? Go ahead.
yeah, I think I mentioned this before, but RILA has been canceled for this year. So due to this, and Tavanda, I understand that MASC, their summer training was canceled as well. They're at the same place, William Woods. And
Yeah, they're doing it virtually, and all the leadership students signed up to attend because it's free. Yeah, and the good thing is they're like recording everything so they can kind of pick a session and watch it on their own time. So
that's great.
They have some summer homework.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Good.
they would have had summer homework also anyway, going to MASC camp. So that's for those of you who don't know, Missouri Association of Student Councils, they're usually there a couple of weeks before RILA session. So it's, again, it's just COVID-19. It's just one of those other casualties of, some of that good work has come to a halt or taken a different turn completely.
Different turn.
Yep.
Very good. So I think without, if anybody has any other burning announcements, or we can get ready to turn the program over to our guest speaker. Hearing none, David, would you introduce our guest speaker?
I will. I've worked with Ann Lee several times. The one that truly impressed me was a number of years ago, and I cannot remember when. Past director Fred Hahn organized, and his club organized a polio day in Independence, Missouri a number of years ago. Ann Lee was one of the speakers, and I knew about polio. I'd heard Carl Chinnery's program numerous times, never heard of post-polio syndrome, didn't understand what anything was about, and then Ann Lee shows up and puts a name and a face and a person to everything there. And we made connections over the years. I think we're in several fellowships together, although I can't recall what they are right now because it's too early. But I'm just gonna turn it over to you, Ann Lee, and let you take it from there and let you drive the conversation and go with it.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone.
Good
morning.
I have to first give a shout out to my governor classmate. Hello, Todd.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
It's good to see you. Can I make a comment without? Are you in your basement?
I am in my basement.
Does your wife let you out later?
No. I'm actually, this is my home gym.
Oh,
and,
cool. All right.
I have gym right after Rotary, so we do that by video training also.
Good for you. I'm impressed. Thank you, guys. I just had to, bug him a little bit. And Tavanda, I don't know you, but I think that I would like to know you, and I wish you the best. And I hope that you come back to Rotary. Rotary needs some good women.
Thank you. It's very nice to meet you.
Thank you. Stay connected. That's all I ask, and I'm sure your club members agree. So thank you all for having me, especially early in the morning. Luckily, I'm on the East Coast, and I'm in Maine, so I'm a little bit later than you. But I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about polio, but also about COVID-19 and the effects it's having on our polio program. And it's certainly an uncertain time that we're living in. As you were having that little discussion, I was learning more about what's happening in your state. And I really do wish that all of you and your families stay safe. That's most important. But for me, the current coronavirus outbreak is reminiscent of polio outbreaks that occurred across North America years ago. And how soon some of us forget, perhaps because so many of us were too young to recall. But the current outbreak does make me think about the polio epidemics of the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. And people lived in fear as the polio virus spread through towns and cities across our nation. Both children and adults were at risk, even right where you're living today. People would avoid public parks, playgrounds, swimming pools and theaters were closed. No large gatherings were held, similar to what we're experiencing now. And similar to this past Easter season, ministers and priests and rabbis had to use radio. They didn't have the benefit of all the technology that we take for granted these days to connect with their parishioners. And those parents who could afford to used to bundle their children up and leave the cities in hopes that more rural areas would offer them protection from the polio virus. Unfortunately, that didn't always work, and it actually helped to spread the polio virus to the more rural regions, such as where I live in Maine. No one knew when polio would strike, who it would attack, and really at the time, no one knew how to stop it. And in reality, they didn't really know how to treat it either. They learned as they went, and that reminds me of sort of what they're doing with the COVID today. Some families were spared, others lost family members, and many families, had multiple members affected, both children and parents. I don't recall this part of it personally, but I know my parents felt the fear because in the end, polio attacked one of their children, and that was me. During the outbreak of 1955, Boston was the center of one of the worst epidemics on the East Coast. Hospitals were overflowing. Sidewalks and streets were full of vehicles bringing in polio victims. Triage took place on the sidewalks as best they could, and many people died. Social distancing was a real thing, and homes were quarantined, and it was a challenging time, just as what we're living in today. Fortunately, a vaccine had been in process for a couple of years, and so it actually came out that same year in 1955, and it started to halt the polio outbreaks across our country. Our medical facilities have improved over the years, and I, for one, am grateful for those who dedicate their lives to a medical profession. Today, as a polio survivor, I'm able to walk with limitations. I have residual damage in both legs and daily challenges to face, but I'm extremely fortunate, and I know that. When I contracted polio, I just want to tell you a little story. It was a time when local papers would list the names of folks who were sick. And my illness was in the Portland, Maine paper, and the Mrs. Woodbury of Brunswick read about me. She promptly sat down and wrote a letter to my mother, and thus began a long relationship between the two of them, with me as the main topic. My mom was a great letter writer. And when I was old enough, I also began to write her letters to Mrs. Woodbury. And when arthritis crippled Mrs. Woodbury's hands, she pecked out her letters to me on an old typewriter. Every time I was in the hospital, I would receive a postcard daily from Mrs. Woodbury. And on every holiday, however small the occasion, as well as on my birthday, she sent me a card. And in those cards, she always tucked $2. Now that doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but I remember the very first time I visited Mrs. Woodbury at her home. She and her husband lived simply, were not wealthy, not monetary wise anyway. But Mrs. Woodbury was rich in heart. And Mrs. Woodbury sent me cards for 35 years until her death. She's my best example, or for me, of what living in Maine's about, but mostly she's my best example of how people and communities everywhere pull together to offer support, even when we're separated by many miles. You see, Mrs. Woodbury taught me the meaning of giving, and more importantly, the art of receiving. And unbeknownst to both of us, she helped to lay the foundation for me to join Rotary. So never underestimate the impact that you may have on one individual's life through an act of kindness. Because an ordinary life can be extraordinary, and that magic can be found in the everyday. And thus you now have a couple of the reasons why I became so deeply involved with polio eradication. For those of you who don't know, I've traveled the world leading NID teams, immunizing thousands and thousands of children. I started in 2001 and have completed 30 of these NID trips. And today, as I said, we're living in frightening times as the coronavirus spreads in ways reminiscent of poliomyelitis. But it's instructive to remember as we go forward what it has taken to nearly eradicate polio, and a reminder of what we can do when we're faced with a common enemy. I just wanted to share some similarities that I've come up with between COVID-19 and polio. Both are a virus, both spread through silent carriers, people who are infected but showing no symptoms. Again, we're not sure how to treat it. We're learning as we go. COVID-19 appears to attack mostly the respiratory system, but also the blood system, and is transmitted via respiratory, your droplets. And polio, although we always learn about it's primarily transmitted through oral fecal, it's also transmitted via droplets from a sneeze or from saliva. Back in the early years, polio primarily attacked children. Today, we know that it's children mainly under the age of 2 that are at highest risk. COVID-19 seems to have an affinity for older adults, but we see exceptions with both. Both outbreaks, both viruses create fear. And there's no vaccine. There was no vaccine available in those early years, and there's no vaccine yet available to fight COVID. Just as a reminder, there are still people today living in iron lungs because, as I said, polio affected the nerves and the muscles and the upper respiratory. Others are still on respirators for a good portion of their day. And the majority of survivors suffer muscle weakness, requiring them to need wheelchairs, braces, crutches, and other mobility aids. And as David mentioned, post-polio syndrome attacks people later on when they start to feel the after effects of polio more, and then they have to resort back to using some of these mobility aids when they'd already overcome the disease. There was a single private charity, the March of Dimes, with the support of our government, that handled basically all of the research for vaccines back in the polio day, their publicity as well as patient support through major fundraising. Dr. Howard Markle, who teaches history at the university, teaches history of medicine at the University of Michigan, he says measures taken in the 1950s, like containment and closing schools, offer some hope for today in fighting COVID-19. And he quotes, "What we can learn is that our predecessors have met these contagious crises with far less armaments and tools in their toolbox. They came through on the other end, and we can do this, and we will do this with COVID-19, unquote. Now, the COVID-19 emergency means that there are aspects of our polio eradication program that are being affected. Polio campaigns have ceased during the COVID-19 outbreak. It was a tough decision to make. But because the majority of work is done via house to house, campaigns were halted to protect both the workers and to reduce the spread of the coronavirus amongst the population. 5 years ago, you'll recall that Ebola hit Africa and governments responded with billions of dollars. Yet everyone, including the then heads of the World Health Organization and the CDC, later agreed that it was the polio workers there in the villages and in the labs who provided the critical initial support to stop the outbreak. Once again, we repurposed our polio workers around the world, and especially in Africa, to assist with the COVID-19 response. In Nigeria, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, where polio personnel and assets have a significant footprint, workers from all of the GPEI, or the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, all partners are pitching in with COVID-19 surveillance, health worker training, contact tracing, risk communications, and more. In Pakistan, UNICEF is supporting polio community outreach networks, using innovative approaches such as WhatsApp messaging, motorbikes, rickshaws equipped with PA systems, mosque announcements, and they're reaching over 1 million households. Also in Pakistan, the polio eradication campaign call centers are today busier than ever. They are reporting phone calls of up to 70,000 a day compared to their usual 4,000. In addition to polio information, workers are giving advice and information about COVID-19, dispelling myths, and advising the population on how to protect themselves. Our surveillance teams are now in pursuit of signs of coronavirus. Active surveillance that tracks the polio virus through samples taken from new paralytic cases, as well as samples from water sources, are now being used to track COVID. And our vaccine cooler boxes are being used to transport these very same samples. Contact tracing, just as we do with polio, is now being applied to COVID. When we find an acute case of paralysis, we always go and test that person for polio. And all those in the close contact with them, like family members and neighbors. We're doing the same now with COVID. The combined surveillance for polio and COVID is ongoing in many countries across Africa and Asia. Polio surveillance staff have also trained and sensitized over 18,000 healthcare professionals to help in the cause. In Afghanistan, the polio surveillance network is fully involved. Over 45% of the polio workers have been trained for the COVID response. In Kandahar, which is the polio virus epicenter, where the program has significant personnel, community social mobilizers have stepped up to deliver soap bars and information on COVID-19 to some of Afghanistan's poorest and most vulnerable communities. Just simply providing a bar of soap and demonstrating its use is a simple COVID-19 prevention measure. The workers also teach physical distancing and the importance of staying home. And the soap packaging carries a pro-vaccine message reading, "Let's come together for a polio-free Afghanistan." Also in Afghanistan, polio workers are delivering baby blankets and soap throughout the Taliban areas. The Taliban reached out for help with response to COVID. And this outreach will be helpful when the polio campaigns start up again. In Nigeria, we have existing polio partnerships that are supported by UNICEF with the Northern traditional leaders. And the council and religious leaders are being used to reach out to communities through social media, TV, radio, and announcement from mosques and churches. In Nigeria, a network of over 7,000 community health agents on polio and other diseases are being leveraged, educating families on preventative measures, as well as helping with the early detection and reporting of suspected cases. Rotarians are busy establishing hand washing stations throughout communities, teaching proper techniques and other preventative measures. Rotarians are also distributing food rations and PPE branded with End Polio. Rotary actually funded most of the surveillance activities in Africa the first quarter of this year. And this activity is the first line of defense in many African villages and cities. I could go on and talk about other countries, but suffice it to say that in several African and Asian countries, such as Niger, South Sudan, the Philippines, India, and more, the polio network is fighting COVID-19 while still preparing for future polio campaigns. We are ramping up and putting plans in place. I just want to take a minute to mention district designated fund allocations that are given to Polio Plus. Continue the vital work and are matched on a 5-to-1 basis by the World Fund and the Gates Foundation. There's no other use of district designated funds that has such a match. So I would urge a district to contribute a portion of that DDF to Polio Plus today. I know many of you may have also been concerned at the increase of polio cases in Pakistan last year. Those occurred because the polio program got briefly off track. There was a change in government leadership, and briefly the government took its eye off of polio. There was polio fatigue being felt at households, where due to the low number of cases being reported earlier, the people weren't feeling the urgency to have their children immunized. The program became a bit political, and the workers were not receiving the respect that they deserved from their focal persons, and some citizens lost faith. But new appointments and changes at the federal and local government levels have turned these concerns around and put the program back on track. And the people realize what will happen if immunizations do not continue. So all of these concerns have been addressed, and the government is more committed than ever to eradicating polio from Pakistan. Rotary and our partners meet regularly with Muslim religious leaders that ensure the people understand the safety of the vaccine. And for the record, religious leaders fully support our program. Earlier this year, I just want to tell you a little story again. Before the COVID-19 hit, Rotary leaders traveled to Pakistan as part of a Rotary delegation that included past RI President Ravi Ravindran, our chair-elect for the Rotary Foundation, and RI President-elect Holger Knock and Mike McGovern, chair of the Rotary's International Polio Plus Committee. It was unprecedented to have 3 major leaders in Rotary travel together to Pakistan, but all felt it necessary and extremely important. The trip was past President Ravi's idea. As the incoming chair of the Rotary Foundation, he and others were quite concerned at the time that Pakistan seemed to be losing ground. So this delegation met with the Prime Minister and with the head of the Pakistani Army. Now, the head of the Pakistani Army is in effect also the chief of the whole Pakistani military. He's an extremely important part of leadership, serving in a capacity similar to the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff here in the United States. The meeting was highly successful. They met with several people besides those 2, and they came away with renewed commitment from everyone they spoke to. So this story just gives you an idea of how Rotary is always working, and we're advocating constantly, often in the background, to get the job done. Another new development that I want you to be aware of is a new oral polio vaccine. Should be available this summer. We're hoping in June it will be rolled out. That will start to reduce the incidence of vaccine-derived polio cases. But remember, it was Rotary who first dreamed of a world without polio. And it was our insistence and resolve that led in 1988 to the World Health Assembly adopting a resolution for the worldwide eradication of polio. It marked the launch of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, spearheaded by national governments, CDC, Rotary International, WHO, and UNICEF. And later, we gained the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which we are extremely grateful for. And most recently, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, has become a partner. As the organization that first envisioned a polio-free world, Rotary's been at the center of the fight to eradicate polio for more than 3 decades. Really, we should all be proud of the work we've accomplished and Rotary's commitment to the pursuit of a polio-free world. Rotarians have contributed well over $2 billion and countless volunteer hours to the fight to end polio. And together with our partners, we immunize over 400 million children every year. Just think of the children we've saved from the paralytic effects of polio. Because when Rotary first started its Polio Plus program in 1985, 1,000 children were paralyzed by polio every single day in 125 polio endemic countries. Today, we just have 2 countries that report cases of wild polio virus, Afghanistan and Pakistan. We've made incredible progress, and we're optimistic that we will succeed. But eradicating a disease is hard work, and getting to 0 cases requires sufficient funding, innovative strategies, perseverance, and it really requires the commitment of every single Rotary member. Because of Rotary, I'm a proud, active player in the eradication efforts, and I'm helping to make history. Think about it. How powerful an idea, how powerful a story, the eradication of a human disease. What is the value of participating in the largest ever private public health initiative that has gained the support of over 200 nations and those 5 powerful partners that started us? That value to me is priceless. Our polio program has come so far, and yes, there are challenges that we will yet face. But the Global Polio Eradication Initiative will remain the standard against all future multilateral public-private partnerships. It is the largest peacetime movement in history, and it's only the 2nd time ever that human dedication and ingenuity has brought the scourge of a disease to the brink of extinction. In a world today, especially fraught with dissension and folly, our success shines, and it proves that we can work together across borders for the benefit of all. Our common future is at stake. Rotary's common future is at stake. We all have a role to play. Remember, the COVID-19 outbreak will create a setback in our polio program temporarily, and we will undoubtedly see a rise in cases when this pause in the eradication efforts is over. Extension planning is ongoing. Vaccination campaigns will be intensified and broad in our attempt to reach every child 5 and under. Not only with polio drops, but it is for certain that some of these campaigns in some countries will include measles and other vaccinations at certain sites. We will no doubt see a resurgence of vaccine-preventable diseases, especially throughout Africa and parts of Southeast Asia. Once again, it's the children who will be affected. Maybe not directly from COVID-19, but from all the other viruses that are lurking amongst an unvaccinated population. This, along with rising food insecurity, as we struggle to get through this. As the GPEI has written in their most recent statement, and I quote, "In solidarity with the most vulnerable, the polio program will share its assets to ensure this new epidemic is defeated as quickly as possible. Our commitment to polio eradication is firm. Our commitment to stand together against COVID is now." We have made incredible progress, and we will succeed. Your personal contributions, those from your club, are needed now more than ever. And every club is asked to contribute a minimum of $1,500 and to create awareness in your communities of what Rotary is doing. Don't forget, you and your club are the best public image voice for Rotary. Good stories truly make our history, and it's vital for generations of every age to learn of the disease that had shaped human history for centuries. I urge you to tell Rotary's story. Be the best Rotary polio advocate you can possibly be. And as the story of polio continues to be written, make sure you are part of it. Whether it be through a personal contribution, through fundraising, advocacy, or telling our story, you should be part of this history. As a person with polio, I remain committed to our cause, and I'm asking you to stay committed with me. Every step that I take is my reminder why we must eradicate polio. Every child you know, every child you see should be your reminder. As Albert Sabin, the creator of the oral polio vaccine, indicated, the true luster is to be found not in setting the goal, but in having the courage to take every step to achieve that goal. So please walk these final footsteps with me. Crossing that finish line is going to take continued vision, perseverance, and wisdom. And it's going to take the heart of many Mrs. Woodburys to be there for that final step. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ann. On behalf of the club, I appreciate it. I muted, most of you are already muted yourself. If you have not, if you have a question, go ahead and unmute and can hopefully answer what you've got.
I'll try.
No questions. That's all. I don't know as you as a speaker, but as me, it's, did I do that good a job? Or you just think it's that bad that nobody wants to ask anything?
I'm worried.
That was a phenomenal.
Was Bill Gates' father a Rotarian?
Seems to me he was.
I
think maybe an honorary Rotarian.
Okay.
But he knew the history of Rotary.
Yeah.
Before his son did, for sure. Any other questions? Comments? Todd, you?
Thank you so much, Ann, for being with us this morning.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Phenomenal talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mitch.
I might add, while in college, I had two fraternity brothers who had polio. One came from Southeast Missouri. The other one came from a little town east of Kansas City. And he later became a pretty prominent orthopedic surgeon in Kansas City. And I can remember him walking with a hand walker cane and coming down. One time he came down off the steps in final week, and he'd been on so much no-dose, he just practically ran across to the breakfast bar. But they both became very successful people and got through their polio.
And how fitting to become an orthopedic physician.
Yes.
Yeah, how fitting. Between that and physical therapists, I have a ton of respect for physical therapists too.
I tell the story also. There's a woman I served with on a university board from Washington, D.C. She received polio as 12. And she had a very prominent international economist in Washington, D.C. And she became the spokesperson for Rotary Polio in Washington, D.C. early on. And she tells the story about being in India and going into a hospital for polio patients. And there was a woman with her daughter's head laying in her lap. And Jenny remembered that was the same situation she had in a St. Louis hospital and as a 12-year-old, and was unable to go into that hospital in India because of having seen that.
Yeah. I had similar issues when my first NID to India was India. And the memories that it brought back were overwhelming, which is why I continued to become more deeply involved in the eradication efforts. It's just brought back so many memories. When I was first in India, it was 2001, and polio was running rampant, and you saw crawlers everywhere, just everywhere. And the rehab centers were fascinating. And as I said, it brought back a lot of memories, and that's when I wasn't even in Rotary at that time, but that's when I vowed that I was going to carry on. And so here I am today, speaking around the world. And
one thing, as you may or may not know, that I know the club knows, I substitute teach, and everybody at school knows I'm a member of Rotary. Everybody at school knows with polio and all of this stuff. So the one class I was teaching, they were 6th grade, and they were reading a book on a polio survivor, a kid who had seen polio and so on. And so I got advance notice of what I would be teaching, and I told her what we've been doing. I asked her if I could kind of deviate from stuff a little bit, do what we need to do with that, but take some more time and discuss polio. So I used pages out of John Germ's playbook. I used when you said crawler is what reminded me. I brought up pictures of what it was like. Pictures of the iron lung. The video that John uses, the 10,000 miles, is that the one? I can't think of the song right now, but anyway, he's got a whole video that's done with the polio words, are the polio story with it, and I used that. The kids asked when I could come back that they could learn more. I wound up going back into that classroom 5 different times during the rest of the year for 15, 20 minutes each time to explain a little bit more about polio. People are interested, especially when they have never heard about it. And this brought it real to them that this wasn't something that is in the history books, but it still is.
It's happening, it's occurring, it's touching people's lives every day as we speak. And, reaching out to the young people is critical. I have also spoken to many classrooms and shown them photos. And when they tell us, you tell that story and you show them what's happening. I mean, I had one little boy who was a Paul Harris Fellow by the time he was 8, because it struck him so that he started doing fundraisers, selling cookies or having a yard sale at his house and telling his mom, we got to get rid of this because we need to help these children. And so never underestimate what the youth will do for you as far as your fundraising, as far as your telling the story. It's phenomenal how well they do. It really is. I was fortunate to actually bring a polio survivor from Nigeria home with me once several years ago and took him around. And he was, he walked on all 4s unless he was in a wheelchair. And I just want you to know that made a statement to him, to many people. So, yeah. So do talk to your students. You mentioned your youth a lot today, and so just keep reaching out to them. It's important. It's also important because we want everybody to vaccinate.
Yeah.
We need to put the vaccinators to bed here.
Yep. So Mitch, I'll turn it back over to you for any final.
Thank you again, Ann Lee. So great to hear your story and the story of what Rotary is doing for polio. Helps us renew our commitment sometimes we get lost in the shuffle of, everything that's going on. And
Easy to do.
we know the impact, as you probably already know, our incoming district governor member of our club, Tom Drennan, does a Polio Plus ride every year. So we, as our members, we try to get behind that and help him raise the funds that he wants. But it just keeps it on the forefront. Lets us know what we're really all about. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else in the club have anything? All right, David, who's our speaker next week?
Who have I got? Oh, gentleman from Operation Warm.
Operation Warm. Very good.
Rich Lally, the Warm Coats.
Okay.
Very good. We will hope to see all of you next week.
We will see you then. I'll send everything out like usual today or tomorrow in the newsletter.
All right. Thank you all.
Take care. Thank you again.
God bless.
Thank you.
Bye, Tabanda.